Hi, I'm Darryn Keiller, and I'm the founder of a company called Way Beyond. So if you want to hear a story about how I started an agricultural technology company when I had no background in farming, and hear how that's been going, the good, the challenges, talk about the food system and farming, and the next generation of digital growers, data and artificial intelligence, and hear some interesting anecdotes about Mexico, then join me with Jennifer Kite Powell on her podcast, Tiny Little Victories.
Hey friends, welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. I'm your host, Jennifer Kite Powell, and today I have a fascinating guest whose name is Darryn Keiller. He's the CEO of Way Beyond, based in New Zealand. Yeah, our first guest from New Zealand. I love that. First Kiwi. Darryn is going to tell us a lot of stories about, first of all, how he started Way Beyond, but more importantly, what is going on in the world of crops, growing crops, and especially one of the most biggest cash crops in the world, which is tomatoes. And we talk a lot about food security, what happened during the pandemic and how it showed the holes in our food supplies, which is a real thing. We also talk about tomatoes in Mexico and the cartel is a cartel story. And we're going to talk about the marriage of farm data with consumer consumption of food data. And so we can begin to get a picture of how we can be more sustainable. And number one, how we grow food. And number two, how grocery stores and other people sell food. I don't know about you, but if you go around to your grocery store or Whole Foods, sometimes there's like just tons of fruits and vegetables that are overripe and they just end up binning all of that. So, how come they can't buy better? And what's happening with the crop yields in tomatoes and vegetables around the world? You may not think about it, but we wouldn't be able to eat without farmers. So Darren's going to talk to us about all of these things that are happening in the world today. And I think you'll find it really interesting because I don't know about you, but I didn't know that McDonald's actually asks to have a tomato grown so it fits on their bun. Yeah, there's a lot of things that go on out there that you may not even think about. Even potatoes, onions, for example, to have them grown so that they can fit into their machines. I mean, seems kind of backwards, right? Like, why wouldn't we just like have build the machine around the natural growth of a potato or an onion or a tomato? But we don't. And that is an interesting topic that we talk about on this podcast. So stay tuned for this next episode with Darryn Keiller. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. I'm your host, Jennifer Kite Powell, and I am here today with an amazing guest from New Zealand. We've never had anyone here from New Zealand, so welcome to the show, Darryn Keiller.
Hey, Jennifer. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, thank you. And you know, everybody's going to want to love to hear your accent, so you're going to have to spend all your time talking. I'm going to put myself on mute here.
Well, not when I started. I mean, I
Yeah,
would
well,
say
now you do. Now you do.
yeah, after 8 years, I've managed to
Yeah.
work a few things out. But yeah,
Yeah. So why? Like I've seen your background. You did a stint at HP. You know, you
yeah,
were a marketing manager for the New Zealand rugby team. Very, very cool. And you've sort of been like business and marketing oriented. And so what got you to this point where you're like, I have to start Way Beyond and I have to do sustainable farming? Like, what was it that brought you here?
yeah. Thanks. No, it's a great question. I mean, I didn't plan on it. I mean, that's the number one thing. I mean,
We
what I
never
was,
do, right?
no, no, right. So, I mean, I had a very successful corporate career, and yet it was unsatisfying for me. I ultimately, you know what I mean. I sort of,
Mm-hmm.
climbed the ladder for a while, and I just found that it wasn't good for the soul. You know what I mean. There was just a
Yeah.
limit,
Yeah.
and so I went looking for something to do really, and that was around about 2013, and I left my last corporate role. I've always loved innovation. I've always loved cool technology. I
Mm-hmm.
love the way that technology um, advances humanity. and solves big problems and small ones.
Yeah,
And
I
I've
agree.
obviously taken inspiration from figures, because I'm 57, so I've taken
Me too.
inspiration. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Really? Wow, that's
Yeah,
cool.
go 57. I feel like we need like maybe some clapping or something. Like I think that's good. That's really
That's very
good.
cool. So and I mean the thing is, and just on a related aside, I mean, there's some really interesting research that's out about founders who are, over 50,
Yeah, yeah.
and because we do come with a lot of, commercial experience that maybe
Experience,
a
yeah.
young founder doesn't have.
No, totally. And
Um,
I agree with you because the last guest on the show was a CEO around the same age, and his name is Anka Schulte Terhorst. And he had done a lot, what you had done, like corporate stuff. He dove into like projects in Ghana, and he just was finding it wasn't satisfying his soul. And he ends up now starting a new sustainable internet service provider in the Netherlands. And we talked about this very same thing where you're finding that experience, business experience. I mean, you've got a
right.
master's in business. I mean, it does lend itself to shepherding and creating companies that probably can shortcut all of the mistakes that a younger founder might make.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's an interesting thing too. I don't know that it does do that.
Oh, okay.
I think when I came in, when I started, I thought that that would be the case,
Yeah.
and I think as the company's kind of got to the stage where it is now, then yeah, a lot of my commercial skills become very, very useful. But I think when you're in
Mm-hmm.
that very kind of first part of actually conceptualizing what you're going to do and then figuring out how to do it and what are you going to need to achieve it, it's actually a very organic process
Yeah.
and not like a corporate environment at all. So I think
Yeah.
actually I kind of had to relearn actually
Ah,
about doing something from scratch.
that's really interesting. So you were sort of corporatized and you had to deprogram yourself a
Yeah,
little
I
bit.
did actually. That's a great way to put it. I did have to
Yeah.
deprogram myself, and
Yeah.
but not lose the knowledge and not lose
Yeah.
the skill,
Yeah.
um, but get out of the habit. And
So
and
true.
yeah. So look, I went looking, and I was like, okay, friends of mine had always said I should have my own business, and because I'd always been like an outlier within the corporate environment, you know,
Yeah.
and so I went and worked with a bunch of startups, and I was working with one that was a drone company, and I worked with one that
Interesting.
was a nano technology company, and I was doing advisory. So I was like sitting on a board, or I was raising capital, or I was helping broker offshore business deals, like all the things that I've got like skills for.
Yeah.
Um,
That kind of
and
makes sense as a run up to what you're doing because you're
yeah,
getting a little bits and
yeah.
pieces of like was that auto grow systems maybe that I'm
Well,
looking at
Autogrow is
here.
where I got into ag, so that was kind of
Okay.
the segue into it all.
Yeah.
And when I sort of got the introduction to the sons of the original founder of that business, it just captured my imagination. It was sort of like
Mm.
got me right into the indoor farming because Autogrow was a bit different. Autogrow was in protected cropping and indoor farming, but it was doing kind of the area that's very sexy that people like to look at
Yeah.
is indoor
Vertical.
vertical farming
Yeah, they love that. They love that
and
stuff.
cannabis production. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
I
always one
couldn't.
or the other to me. It's like cannabis or porn is like the lead entry point to like how we're really going to use some of these technologies.
Right, right. Which is, not, I'm sure not what the inventors of the original underlying
No.
technology had in mind.
No,
But
not at all.
so, so it was, meeting a garage company, a company born in a garage,
Mhm.
and then the founder had passed on, and the sons were in a sort of a bit of a desperate situation, and we got introduced, actually through my brother. One of my brothers knew one of the sons,
Oh.
and New Zealand is like 5 million people. It's
Yeah,
not,
you guys kind of all know everybody by like
yeah,
6 degrees of separation.
sort of thing. Yeah, so it was, that's how I got the intro. And I think the thing that really stood out to me within like about 3 or 4 months, especially once I started talking to growers,
Yeah.
farmers, and also supermarket companies who were buying the produce, was just how kind of old everything was. Like just the way everything was
Mm.
done was
Did that surprise you?
very throwback.
Did
It did
do you think it?
surprise me. It did
Oh, okay.
surprise me because I mean I'm coming out of an environment where I'm exposed to the latest tech. Whether it was cloud and AI and software as a service and all these things, and yet none of that seemed to be present in farming.
Mm.
Really people were still focused on physical things.
Yeah.
The tractors, the physical infrastructure of the farm. Um,
Monitoring the land. I think that's really true. I write a lot about tech, and I always see that disconnect, right? You see, we talk about all this technology, and then you actually go and you're talking to the growers and farmers like you did, and you're seeing they're still really in a very like manual, like analog, just
oh
trying to
yeah,
keep up with everything. It's
yeah,
the hype
yeah.
cycle of the media too, and I imagine that experience really gave you a lot of insight into how Way Beyond needed to grow or what it needed to do.
Well, it was what gave birth to the concept. I mean, essentially,
Okay.
it was, there's a clear need for the. So I sort of, got very challenged by that and inspired by that, around, well, was there an opportunity for me to play a role in helping advance that? So that was kind of where it all started. And,
Okay.
and then I conceptualized how would I do that?
And you have this Way Beyond has done so well though. It's been 6 years, I think, since you've started, almost 7 years, and you already have 20 plus or more enterprise customers in North America and Europe and Africa and China. I mean, 6 years, that's really fast. And so my big question to you is like, why do you think that like Way Beyond has been able to deliver at that level in such a, you may feel like a long time to you, but I think on a scale of things with this type of technology, that's moving pretty quickly.
Well, that's interesting, your perspective too, because, I obviously do feel like it's been a long time. And really it's actually just been the last three years because the first three and a half years were basically just doing R&D, and a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
was, up to the point of doing farm trials in 2019,
Oh,
which we did
interesting.
locally in New Zealand. Luckily, there's some operators here that are large enough and complex enough that they were kind of good proxies for some of the international customers we
Mm.
have now. And ironically, they're not customers. So this is the other thing that I find super weird about this whole process of entrepreneurship is that we ran all of these really successful trial programs with these two large corporatized, farm operators in New Zealand, and
Mm.
then neither of them are customers.
That's so
Um,
funny. Why do you
yeah,
think that is? You hear that a lot though. It's not
it's
like,
super weird. I don't know.
yeah.
I mean, I've talked to them about it and said, "Hey, do you know that we've signed up like these huge multinational growers in Europe and America, and they're all using our technology that was
Yeah.
proved at your farm, and yet you don't want to
Yeah.
use it?" And I go, "I
Yeah.
don't get it." And then I just get all these different excuses, and I think, there was an old expression which I think went something like, that a prophet is never, sort of, understood in their own land. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's
Um,
like if they say you become an intern, you'll never really advance until you leave because they're still going to always see you as the intern. Like
right.
it's very difficult to get ahead.
Right. It's like that. So really when we launched, we launched in our first product, which was our, sort of, sensor network, which does all the
Yeah.
environmental and plant sensing. And we launched that in February of 2020, which is when the pandemic came upon us all,
Yeah.
and terrible timing. I mean,
Yeah,
after
absolutely.
3 years and lots of money gone in already, and then you go into market and then it's about survival. So
Yeah, so let's paint a picture for the listeners, right? You were in R&D for 3 years. You said you
yeah.
did your farm trials in 2019. Then you
Hmm.
came out of that, and then basically it was COVID in the pandemic. And
Yeah.
so you launched the first product in 2022. So what a weird ride for you. And again, back to my point of this is really fast in a way because you had 3 years of R&D and then some weird ass dormant time during COVID. And then when you came out and did the
Right.
sensor network, were people just clamoring for this, or did they feel a need for this? Or was like, how did that happen so
Well, I
quickly?
mean, again, I think, with digital. technologies and digital farming, it's so new to the industry
Yeah.
that it then was, trying to find the growers who were the kind of classic early adopter type persona that would take it and run with it
Mm.
and do that all remotely. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
this is an industry that's built on personal relationships. It's built on
Totally. The farm.
Yeah, it's built on going to the farm and spending time
Yeah.
with the operators and the growers, and we were unable to do that. I guess that I think the weird flip side of it was that the pandemic leveled the playing field. I mean,
Totally.
everybody had to get online. Everybody had to go on a web call. Whether it was someone who's a buyer or someone who's a seller,
That's a
and
really good
it also
point.
meant that some of the advantages that people who at the time could be argued to be our competitors at that early stage, they were physically closer to where the customers were, but
Mm.
suddenly that didn't matter anymore because they
Yeah.
couldn't leave their homes.
I love that. All level the playing field and your advantage. And what you had mentioned that there were some early adopters. Were those, I'm just guessing, were those early adopters in Europe or in Africa
They
or
were
maybe
in
North
they were in
America?
one in Australia,
Okay.
one in Europe, and one in the US, and that was kind of where we initially started.
Interesting. Oh,
Um,
really?
and yeah, 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 and I mean, and then we released our actually what really drove that was the release of our second product, which was our AI based yield prediction for tomatoes. So that brings the
Yes.
tomatoes and
Yeah. Here comes the tomatoes into the
here
story.
comes the
Uh,
tomatoes. So basically that was the funny thing was, is that when I did my first investor pitch, which was in January of 2016 at an angel event, it literally is a photo of me in my suit standing on the stage holding a bunch of tomatoes in my hand.
I love it. I
Um,
absolutely love it because I'm so fascinated by this tomato story. Can I just talk for a minute about how massive the tomato crop is out there around the world? I
sure.
mean, I, let's talk about how massive this tomato crop is because I did a little research and I found that China is the number one producer of tomatoes.
That's probably true. Yeah, I mean, I
That
would.
surprises me.
It does surprise me also. I mean, I know that they, tomatoes tradition. Well, tomatoes came from Mexico, so actually the origin point of tomatoes as a fruit. Well, we call
Yeah,
it a
exactly.
vegetable, but it's actually a
Yeah,
fruit.
but there's definitely a fruit. And Mexico's number 9 on the list of the top countries that grow tomatoes. It's
Right.
China, India, Turkey, US, Egypt, Italy, Iran, Spain, Mexico, and Brazil.
Yeah.
All surprise me.
Yeah. And the majority of that volume is actually grown in open field. So it's an
Oh,
ingredient product.
did not know that.
Whereas
Okay.
if you're a consumer going to a supermarket and you're buying fresh tomatoes, there's really
Yeah.
only two places those come from. They'll either come
Uh,
from a glass house, a hot house as it used to be
yes.
called,
Okay. Yep.
or it'll come from an organic farm. Because that's kind
Interesting.
of, again, that's been really dictated by partly the evolution of farming systems being, greenhouses, glass houses,
Mm-hmm.
and also which means you can grow all year round,
Yep.
and also the emergence of organics, and so when
Yeah.
that organics movement, sprung up, maybe 30, 40 years ago now, fresh produce was a big part of that. And so if you want like the heritage tomatoes, with all
Yeah.
the different color spectrums
Yeah. The
and
heirloom tomatoes. Yeah.
yeah, and the taste profiles and all
Yeah.
that stuff, then that's the organics.
So are those are so you're saying there's like two different like ways to having tomatoes. If I'm eating a can of soup or like boxed soup or something
Yeah,
that has a like canned tomatoes,
yeah,
those are grown in the soil where
yeah,
fresh tomatoes are grown in a hothouse or a glass house or they're
correct.
organically grown.
Generally
Fascinating.
speaking, yes, that's
Okay,
right.
generally speaking.
Yeah.
And what is happening with the tomato crop in terms of like what is the with your AI product that you've come out with? What
hmm
what it was so necessary that these tomato crop yields needed artificial intelligence to make bigger crop yields or what was going on there?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we chose that was because that particular crop is that it's so dominant. So when you look at
Hmm,
total production, tomatoes make up about 40% of what is produced. And
really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you talk to the seed companies like Bayer, BASF, Syngenta,
Yeah.
to their vegetable seed division, the tomato is the cash cow. I mean, basically, that's the highest volume seeds they do. It's what generates most of the money, and it's what generates most of the profit.
Wow.
So it's the dominating, fruit or vegetable that's produced. And there are so many varieties. I mean, I think this is the other thing that when you're a
Yeah.
consumer, unless you're like a home chef and you're thinking about
Yeah.
these things all the time,
Yeah.
you don't really think about how many varieties of tomato there are, and there's
No, you don't.
hundreds of them. Um, and so, you get the guys that are producing. So the growers we work with in Mexico, maybe to make this more real for the listeners,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
growers that are producing in Mexico, the group that we work with in Sinaloa, which is actually where the drug cartels are quite active.
Yes, I know.
Um,
I was gonna say Sinaloa,
and I'll
drugs,
tell a story
tomatoes.
about that
Yeah. Oh,
as well.
good. I love a
Um,
little cartel story.
got to get one of those in on the
Yeah,
podcast.
totally. Yeah.
So, one of the producers we work with, they're actually producers for the fast food industry. So
Okay.
essentially, when you've got McDonald's, Burger King, those
Yeah.
guys, and they want to have like a certain size
Tomato
tomato,
slices.
yeah,
Yeah.
that they can slice and then, obviously just put it right in the burger.
What?
So that's a very particular type of supply chain that they source
Oh
from.
my God, you're blowing my mind, Darren. Like
So
the
that's,
idea that people would grow tomatoes that are just for commercial, like fast food eating because
yeah,
of the
that's what
right
they do.
size that
That's what
goes
they
on
do.
your burger.
Yeah, yeah. And the same with onions, because if you think about the onion rings and like the
Oh
size of them,
yeah.
they want them to be at a certain size and weight and other
So
characteristics.
they just don't go to like a wholesaler and buy like boxes and boxes of tomatoes. They specifically have these grown
They'll
for
say
that
we want
purpose.
this variety of, like, if they're making the French fries, they'll say we want this
Yeah.
variety of potato. And I think a lot of that has just been lost. I think people just don't understand that there's still this group of people who have dedicated their lives to producing our food that we eat. You know,
I think you're
um,
so right. We take that whole industry and farmers for granted because even regardless of your if you're in a hot house in Mexico or Australia or even in Vermont, an
right?
organic hot house, like there are real people going in there and checking the soil and looking
They
for
are.
humidity
They
and
are.
water and planting these seeds, and you just don't think about how much is provided for us as humans, and what would we do if we didn't have crops and farmers?
Right. And I mean, and there, everything flows downhill. You know what I mean? So the thing is
Yeah.
that every time a government makes a regulatory change or there's some, whether it's about, is it non-GMO, is it, pesticide, herbicide free, is it, all of this flows down to the poor old farm operator
Yeah, yeah.
who's got to figure all that out, right? At the same time, while they're battling climate change, pest and disease outbreaks, labor shortages,
Drought. Yeah.
drought. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
It's
Um,
amazing they're still producing food.
well, yeah, but the other thing is you'll never meet a more passionate group of people. I mean, they absolutely love what they do. I mean, it's
I
like a
love that.
lifestyle choice. It's a
I
vocation.
love
It's
that.
not it's not a job, And that's the thing that I really enjoy about our customers is they're so passionate about what they do. And so
Yeah.
they're genuinely invested in the fact that we are passionate about what we want to do to help them. And I think that's a really, that's the common meeting point that we start with is that relationship and then how
Mm-hmm.
we collaborate together. And that's a very important part of Way Beyond's ethos and the way that
Yeah.
we work with our customer is it's a partnership to both be successful together. And I
Yeah,
think,
you can see that. You can feel that through the even just for the website. I mean, I know it's a corporate website, but you do feel this sort of labor of love from you and from the website about really creating this ecosystem that supports each other. And I
yeah,
would imagine that, these farmers, like you said, they're dealing with so much, everything rolls downhill. And then to be sort of accosted with yet you need to digitize, right? You could use this
yeah.
technology to, like, oh, you can buy an autonomous tractor. I mean, I would imagine this is just yet another level of difficulty for them. And I
Well,
think
it's
that
another thing they have to think about when they're already
yeah,
thinking about so many things. And then,
yeah,
and that's where we're constantly learning about how do we best communicate with them? How do we best, sort of present the opportunity as a way of helping them and make it easy for them. So we spend a lot of time trying to make it easier. And I mean, that's something we learn with every engagement. So, but let me tell you the Mexico story because
Oh, yes, yeah.
I
I
want to
put a
make
star
sure
by that in my
we
notes,
have
so you're
we
not
have
getting
time
away
for
with
that.
that.
So,
Yeah, we do. We have time. We have time.
there's the thing around, obviously when you think about, when you're building a global business, one of the big things you have to think about is not just the technology working on a farm. You've got to think about the fact that it's got to work on every farm, right? Everywhere in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and that scalability is one, nut you have to crack, right? Then you've got the whole thing of business, market access. So like, how are you going to access a new market? And so you typically will look at, what are the characteristics and economics and the things that are going on in that country. And so when you look at Mexico, I mean, Mexico is like, I mean, if you wanted a business case, for an MBA sort of thing, you know, and you want to pick one of the hardest countries in the world to actually enter as a market, Mexico would be one of them. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got a highly political environment. I mean, if you think the US is political,
Yeah.
um,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
and you've got a high degree of corruption, right? So you've got this
Mm-hmm.
very challenging, geopolitical type thing going on. You've got all the internal politics, and yet you've got a country that's a massive food producer, right, and a massive farm, operates a lot of farming, and they're actually, as a people, they're highly educated, they're very contemporary, and they, if you go to Mexico City, it's got all the bells and whistles, that you would find in New York or anywhere else, but it has some unique characteristics, and one of them is the cartels, right? And the cartels permeate everything about life in Mexico. Um, and it just so happens that El Chapo's cartel was the Sinaloa cartel,
Yeah.
um, and that happens to be where a lot of our growers are. So I was actually sending my chief technology officer. He was due to go to Sinaloa to visit the growers with some of my team, and the Mexican government, for whatever reason, decided to arrest El Chapo's son.
I saw that in the news.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was relatively recent,
Yeah.
and so I said to him, understandably, I said no. I said I think we'll delay you
Yeah.
coming in because there was a firefight broke out. So a
Yes,
firefight
I saw
broke out,
that. I saw
and they
that.
were
Yeah.
yeah, and there were bullets hitting the fuselages of the planes at the airport.
Oh my
Um,
God. So
so
scary.
and then I said, why don't you wait 4 weeks until I arrive? Because at that point I was in Europe. And I said, and hopefully things will have died down a bit, and we can go together. So he and my two local team, who are both Mexican people, they were
Yeah.
with me. And so we flew to we did this trip all around Mexico, but we flew into Sinaloa, and like literally, and I can't say that there wasn't a little bit of nervousness or
Oh
trepidation
my
on my
gosh.
part,
Absolutely. I would
because
think there would be.
there was, and one of the team actually lives in Sinaloa State, so he knows and understands how it all works. And so but as soon as you're like literally like about 5 minutes out from the airport, you see the first of those. If you've ever watched like the movies or the TV shows that kind of like dramatize the cartel
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
thing,
All their cars coming in like in a
yeah,
row,
right.
like
So you
20
normally see
Cadillac
like the
Escalade.
big
Yes.
the big 4x4 that's got
Yeah.
the
Toyota 4Runner.
M50 machine gun like
Yeah.
sitting on the back, and so like we saw those within 5 minutes of leaving the airport. I mean, and they were
Oh my
just
God.
everywhere. And when we would go through roadblocks, like there were
Oh my
crossroads that
God.
had been blocked off by the military and the police, and the point that one of my team made to me, the guy who lives locally, is that you don't want to be at these stops for too long, because if they find a bad guy, often a firefight breaks out, and then obviously innocent people get caught in the crossfire. So he was sort of saying we really want to get through this really really quickly. And
Oh
so
my
we were
God. That
going
is
through that.
all for these tomatoes. Like
Yeah, and that was
I
all to get to the farm. So we get to the farm, and the farms are they're about between 150 hectares to 450 hectares. So that's, to put that for the listener, that's a
yeah.
hectare is basically a football field. So if you go to
Yeah.
an NFL game, that's basically a hectare, but it's under a net, what's called a net house. It's under netting.
Yeah. Okay, a
Um,
net house. Yeah, I've
and
seen
they're
them.
operating between 150 football fields to 450 football fields of tomato
Unbelievable.
production. So these are massive farms that you
Yeah.
can only cross them in 4x4s. You can't cross them by
Oh
foot.
my God. Are those the
Um,
soil tomatoes or are
yeah,
those
they're soil, but they're
okay.
grown
Okay.
under cover.
Under nets. Okay.
Under nets, yeah, and so they're actually the standard of the build is pretty impressive, to be honest,
Mm. I
and
really
really
want to see
again
a
really
picture of
lovely
that.
people. So we're at this one farm, and this we've just come out of the greenhouse, and we've been talking about our technology and the plants and how is it all going, and then this what looks like a 1980s, this big 1980s Datsun sedan
Yeah.
rolls in, and out of it steps this guy who must be like 85 years old, wearing like a Mexican cowboy hat, and
Tomato
um,
Godfather.
and then he is, yeah, and that's who he is. And then my guy says, "Oh my God," he said, "that's the owner." And I said,
Whoa.
"Well," and I said, "Why the oh my God reaction?" He said, "Oh, because he never comes to the farm, you know."
Wow. I love
And it
that.
turns out he'd come to see me because I was the CEO and I was visiting his farm. And in Mexican society, hierarchy and positional things are very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so culturally, and he couldn't speak any English, and
Yeah. You had to have a
so
translator.
yeah, the guys, my team translated for me, and it was a very
What
brief
did
conversation, shook
I
hands.
love that. Did he ask you any questions or
Oh,
what
he
was
just
his
said, how was the trip going? And I said, no, it's great, and your team are really wonderful people. So I said lots
yeah.
of nice things about his team, and
That's hard.
then but I was talking to my one of my guys, and I said, "Oh, who's the other guy?" There was another guy loitering around the thing, and he went, "Oh, that's his driver," and he said, "But he's also his bodyguard." And
I
I
was
said,
gonna say
"Really?"
there has to be a bodyguard in
And
here
he said,
somewhere.
and I said, "Is he armed?" And he went, "Oh yeah, he'll be armed." And then he said, "You do realize that the car is bulletproof, right?"
Oh my God.
He
A
said, "Is
Datsun.
it?"
Oh my God.
He said, "Oh yeah." He said, so I went up and I had a look at it, and sure enough, the glass was plate. And I was like, "Oh,
That's fascinating. That is
So, and
fascinating.
I
But
said,
of
"Is this
course it
quite
makes
common?"
sense.
And he said, "Yeah, oh yeah." He said, "Most of the owners of the farms have got bulletproof vehicles, so
That
and
is
have bodyguards
fascinating.
and all of that." Yeah, there was a guy. I'll just mention one other thing because I could talk about
No,
Mexico
you
all
no,
day long.
I love these
And,
stories. These are great. These are
and
exactly what I was hoping
so
for.
we went and visited this other guy, another CEO, and he I obviously can't mention the name of the farm, can't mention the guy because that wouldn't be right.
That's okay.
And but he's very wealthy and he operates all these different businesses, of which the farming is just one of them. And you got to kind of appreciate the landscape. It's a very dry, brown, um, kind of barren sort of region, right?
Mm-hmm.
And within
Mm-hmm.
which these net house farms operate, and um, and in the middle of this, right, we're driving up the road to thing. There is this state of the art, architecturally designed building, like just sitting in the middle of nowhere, right? And so we get in, and you go in, and there's this high vaulted ceiling, and there's this beautiful artwork installation, and it's like, wow, this
My
guy's got
God.
serious coin, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then all the doors are controlled by facial recognition systems.
Stop
I
this
kid you not.
story.
This thing was like just the contrast between this
Yeah,
high
yeah,
tech,
it's
yeah,
face
and
recognition. Am I Mission Impossible versus the I've been to that area. It's very brown. It's very yeah, like and then
right,
these tents over covering these tomatoes and then facial recognition.
yeah, yeah. So this guy is seriously wealthy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so we have the meeting with him, and when he comes in, he's actually really, really, he's this tall, rugged, aggressive
Wow.
guy. Yeah, and he really ripped into me and just was like, so what are you going to do for me? You come all the way
Wow.
here. I mean, it wasn't like anything polite about it at all.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Was anything polite?
And so I decided to respond in kind. And my team were watching this, and they're all going, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? What's
Yeah.
Darren going to say?"
That's when you really got to read the room, right, Darren?
Yeah,
Like
you
you
have to
gotta.
read the room, and
Yes,
this is where a bit of I'm going to say it, but a bit of maturity and a bit
I
of
like it.
you know,
I'm with
there's a
you.
bit of being able to read the room and judge
Gravitas. Can we call
personality.
it gravitas?
And and so I responded in kind, and I
Yeah.
just spoke to him very confidently,
Yeah.
strongly,
Yeah.
called him out on a couple of things, and he went, "Okay, good,
He
okay, let's have a
respected it. He
conversation."
respected it.
He
Yeah.
respected it, yeah.
Yeah.
But afterwards, when we were leaving, and so we talked for about another half an hour, and then we left, and I said to the guys, I said, "Is it just me, or does this guy come across like the Godfather? Like that his stuff is like the Godfather?" He kind of had that whole demeanor about him,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when you put it in the context of his apparent wealth, display of wealth, and all these things, so and I think this is one of the great contrasts, that you got what is
Yeah.
a country with a lot of people who are very heavily impoverished, right? And you've
Mm-hmm.
got
Mm-hmm.
growers who go to great lengths to provide good income, good wages for their workers,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have some incredibly wealthy people who are very powerful players in the ecosystem. And so if you're going to operate as a company providing products and services into that market, you've got to
Mm-hmm.
be able to span. If you're an ag, you've got to be able to
Yeah.
span between the laborer
Yeah.
who's pruning the vine, all the way up to the godfather
With the
who,
facial
who
recognition access chamber.
yeah, who
Yeah.
ons it all. And I
But
think that's a very important part of being successful in
mm,
a complex market. you know
it's so interesting that you paint this picture because you're absolutely right. You've got two ends to this market. You've like you see the person in the soil trimming the worker, and then in this case you've got somebody that's protecting his income because, like you said, tomatoes are a cash crop coming out of Mexico. So it would make sense that this person would be modern and would want the technology and would protect his investment with facial recognition. And I would also imagine, can you imagine the number of people that want to come in there and like pull one over him
oh, sure,
because
absolutely.
of where he is? And I think
Yeah,
like your ability to sort of connect those two pieces together. This is such an interesting market, like you said, because it is so different on both ends and it's got to come together in the middle. I have two more questions for you if you
sure.
have time.
Hmm.
Um, how do you think this tech is going to change the game for farmers? Farmers in the long run, maybe not the person in the soil, but the person that owns the farm. Is this something that you're hoping to see will change? How they manage their farm, or how it helps maybe move us towards more sustainability in terms of how we're farming? What do you think is the big?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, 100%. I mean, my goal is transformation, and it always has been.
Okay.
It's never been about simply introducing, new tools.
Yeah.
Obviously
Yeah.
there are new tools. That's part of what we
Yeah.
do. But that's the enabler, right? It's really
Yeah.
around, and this is what I talk a lot about to customers and to strategics, because we work with
Yeah.
some of the big seed companies too, and that's often the conversation with those guys is that they've got to look at this more as changing the farm practices themselves, right? So
Mm.
and we all see this. I mean, if you think about even just the daily things we do and how different, the mobile phone, the smartphone, mobile apps have changed the way we do everything. It changes the way we
Everything.
bank, it
Everything.
changes the way we shop, it changes the way, and you've got to kind of think about that in the context of farming, that introducing new devices and software means you have to change the way you do what you do. And I think this
Mm-hmm.
is the thing that the farmers are really um, grasping around is like, okay, can you help me with that? It's almost like, look, we
Yeah.
love the technology, we
Yeah.
love what it does
Yeah.
for us, but
Yeah.
actually the real challenge is how do we change what we do as a result of now having these tools?
But
Um,
behavior is the hardest thing to change, I
yeah,
think.
so that's actually what we're doing, and so we've done a couple of things to reflect that. One is we've just established a new function in our business, which is one that's actually used in other industries, and it's called customer success. So it's having a
Okay.
customer success function whose role really is to maximize the customer user experience, but it's also to take them on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is having a really strong educational component to what we
I
do.
love
And,
that. I
and
love
so
that.
we recently sent our senior scientist, plant scientist, along with one of our seed company partners, one of their senior scientists, and they just went and spent a whole bunch of time in Mexico with our growers, actually helping them understand how to interpret the data that is coming from our Farm Road platform.
That was my other question, if we
Yeah.
had got time for it, was to get
Hmm.
into like how are these guys understanding data? And I'm just putting like a little pin in this other question now that you're still talking. But this
Yeah.
seed, I mean, how are you working with seed companies? Because they're just making the seed for these farmers to grow. So why would they
Right.
be interested in what would they be using from Way Beyond?
Right.
Because I
Well,
never,
interestingly, they're using everything that we do. And
oh,
just
okay.
and just to sort of, maybe summarize what that is. I mean, we've come a long way in 3 years on the technology product side as well. So what we have now is like a pretty comprehensive suite of products and services that essentially run and optimize everything from seed to harvest. So basically, everything to do with production, we can now materialize as in data models and as sort of um, prescriptive outcomes. So we can basically
Okay.
analyze what's happening around pest and disease and
Okay. So
climate and
let's take an
yeah.
example. So say
Hmm.
a grower buys seeds from a seed company, right?
Yeah.
And the seed company then obviously they want to maximize their investment on the seeds, but let's say they don't have any data on what's happening at the plant level of their plants, like
Yeah.
so they don't understand plant temperature or moisture sensors or anything that's going to help their investment from the seed company grow. Is that basically what we're talking about? Is
Yeah, it is. It
maybe
is, and
okay,
so for the seed companies, we're doing two things for the seed companies really at a
okay,
high level. One of them is they're our customer, and we're actually helping them produce better seeds.
got it. Okay.
And so we're using all the same technology stack, but in a much more sophisticated way with
Fascinating.
them. And so with them, they're interested in the seed, not the fruit. So what we do is
Exactly.
yeah, so we're helping them optimize production of the fruit for the purpose of yielding the seeds, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, and what they want is better quality seeds because better quality seeds are better for the grower, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
they ensure a better outcome for the grower in terms of yield quantity, quality, consistency, like all those things that the grower needs to be able to achieve for its buyer, which is the food companies and the supermarkets. So that's where, also the seed companies don't understand what necessarily happens with the seeds once they're actually put in the hands of the grower, right? And
Right,
so,
right. They have no control over that asset anymore. Like they've
no, they
sold it.
don't.
It's
And
yeah.
part of where they see the value with us is that we're kind of like the bridge between them to the grower because we're obviously
Mm-hmm.
collecting all the grower data around actually how is that crop actually producing and performing in real life, you know, out on the farm.
Yeah.
Um,
And so since you've been collecting data for the past
mhm.
3 or so years, you've got these three products. At what point do you think you're going to have like a really good set of data to be able to look and see, um, maybe predict in a way some climate changes, drought, water, sun, pests? Is there any outcome that you want to see from collecting data over this period of time that would be a benefit for the grower?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the immediate now, there's already things that we can provide them that help with predictive elements of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's around early detection of outbreaks and then being able to take preventative actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's a today thing that we do. The future stuff is kind of going to be really interesting at a kind of country, geo level, because ultimately, when we've amassed enough data around, crops, crop performance, environmental factors, water usage, all those things, we're going to be able to say, well, this is what performs better in different environments. In other words, matching genetics to environment at a
Mm.
country level. Being
Yeah.
able to um, utilize data to say, well, like best practice is actually to do it this way because that
Mm.
optimizes resource usage, right? So then you can start getting into really clever things around, you're able to basically do benchmarking to keep it
Yeah. Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Um, so
Which
there's
makes
and
sense.
honestly, there's endless possibilities. The other one that's really interesting in the long run is also on about the usefulness of the data for the buyers, because the thing is that the buyers don't have direct visibility to what's happening with production output on the farms.
What
But
do you
what
mean
if
by a
they?
buyer? Who's the
So I
buyer?
mean, I mean a supermarket like a
Oh, the
Walmart,
supermarket. Okay.
yeah, like a Walmart or a
Whole Foods or
McDonald's or Whole Foods,
yeah.
like
McDonald's, right?
anybody.
They're buying tomatoes. Yes.
Right. Well, they do. I mean, the interesting thing
Yeah.
about McDonald's sourcing model which you probably know this, but they source everything direct. So what they do is if they want, Angus beef for their patty burgers, for the patties for the
Yeah.
burgers, they go and
Yeah.
contract directly to growers, to farmers, to get that particular quality of beef. Similarly,
That
they go
is.
to, yeah, hmm
Go ahead. No, no, that's fascinating because I lived in France for over a couple decades, and I never a big fan of fast food, but every now and then I would like maybe a McDonald's burger and some fries. I got hands down, it's 200% better than going here in America to get a burger. It's
Oh yeah,
because I was reading about the farmers. They go, and there's also a lot of protests. The French love to like dump milk in the street when they're angry,
yeah,
but it was this guy was explaining it to me that it's because it's all locally sourced. So potatoes are from Bretagne, I mean, they are very potatoy.
yeah.
And that's a fascinating model. And again, comes back to talking about the complexity of this market that you're selling in, right? You've got fast food people that are sourcing directly. You've got soil tomatoes. You've got Sinaloan tomatoes. What are you hoping this will do for the environment and sustainability in the long run? I mean, obviously we're sort of coming at a tipping point here, and will this change things? Will it
I
help?
think everybody's relying on imports, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
it really highlighted how broken the system is
it,
in a
it
way.
did, it did, it did. It also showed you kind of like the flip side of globalism, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not
Oh,
saying that
yes.
I'm
Yes.
not taking a political position and saying that. I'm just sort
You're
of
just
saying,
saying it.
we've created this really complex web
Yeah, we have.
of relationships, which has worked pretty well for
Yeah, I mean,
30
I've
years.
my my motto is just because you care to discuss it doesn't mean you're taking a side. Like having a discussion about something, I always find people sometimes they're like, "Oh, just what you believe?" I'm like, no, we're just discussing it. Like, it's
Yeah,
a
right.
viable topic, and we're discussing it. I care about
Exactly.
it, so we're discussing it.
Exactly. And so I
But I
think
do
that
agree, it is the flip side of globalization for
it,
sure.
it is, but it took a critical event like the coronavirus to surface it, you
Hmm.
know. And this is partly what's contributing to this kind of return to nationalism, right? Is
Yes.
this idea that, oh, boy, we really need to be able to look after ourselves, and this is again
Yeah.
another thing that's driving investment into rejuvenating, localized farming, domestic based food production,
Mm.
to what extent you can, reduce reliance on external food supply, right? So I think that,
Yeah.
and if you think about, burgeoning population growth like you have in India and sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, these guys have got a lot to figure out because they're going to have these
Oh,
massive
I
young
know.
populations. I mean, we've got oversupply in the West. I mean, let's not beat
Yeah.
around the bush,
Yeah.
right? We've
Yeah.
got
We totally do.
oversupply in
Yeah.
the West. We've got wastage. We've got obesity. We've got,
So much,
I mean,
so much waste. It's almost upsetting to
it
go
is
into a
upsetting,
place. Yeah,
but
to
that
go into
shows you how
like,
inefficient it all is, right?
yeah, and
Because
I
there's just
wonder
so
when
much
I'm at
largesse, you know.
yeah, I'm looking at bananas that they're putting into a shopping cart because they're too brown. And I was at a nursery the other day, and they were throwing out these beautiful white salvias. And I'm like, "What's wrong with these?" It goes, "Oh, because the store doesn't want us to keep them because they're little browns on the end." I go, "Take a scissor, snip, snip, put some water on them. They're fine." I said, "What are you going to do with them?" Because we just bin them. I mean, just this massive amount of
Yeah.
throwing away, And who's over ordering this food for grocery stores? Like, why? Why are we even throwing away avocados? Like, you should just have them run out of avocados and they get a new shipment
But
in
this
next
is the
week.
thing.
Like,
This is the problem they're having around managing demand and supply, right? And I
yeah,
think that this is where data can be really useful. So
yeah,
the marriage of farm data, which is what we have, with consumer purchasing data, that's a really interesting idea,
yeah.
right?
I would love
So
people to be using that because it stresses me out when I go to the
well,
store
look,
and
I
I
mean, and
see.
that's going to optimize. That's going to optimize, consumption levels, and it's going to optimize, therefore, production levels, and it's going to reduce wastage. So when you do start kind of coming back to the topic around, sustainability, that's where that starts to come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just about on-farm, sustainability, which is more to do
Yeah,
actually with environmental management rather than sustainability per se. It's really actually the food system itself that's the part that needs to be
yeah,
sustainable. And so I think that that's where the greater opportunity is that, can we get a lot smarter? Well, I think we can get a lot smarter with data,
yeah. I
right?
agree.
Data is part of the answer and about how we understand what's really going on, and then how we try to balance the system, if I can use that expression.
You can.
So I think there's some really exciting things ahead, and I certainly Way Beyond is going to play a role in that.
Well, I'm excited to see your role in that, because I think, again, you may feel like it's a long time, but if you really strip it down, it hasn't been that long to your march to what you've been able to successfully do in these 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 countries. And this is fantastic. And I guess my last question is this: there is maybe it's a fun question, but I think there's a Global Tomato Congress in Rotterdam in May.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm fascinated by this. I was going to mention at the beginning, but so you guys are a silver sponsor, I see. But what
Correct.
is going on at a tomato congress? What's happening there? I must
Yeah, well,
know.
I mean, like I said, tomatoes are, the number one crop. It's like corn is for row crops. It's the dominating crop, and and this is actually only the second year of this Congress.
Okay.
It's the organization that runs it is FruitNet, who oversee kind of more broadly the whole fruit and vegetable thing. But tomatoes is such a big category; it's kind of now got its own.
I love it.
Place.
A tomato congress. I'm just fascinated by it.
I know, right? It's not something that you would ever think would exist, but there it is.
No, and I'm going to follow along with it now because I'm so interested. And I also lived in Amsterdam for a long time, and I do think the Dutch are very savvy about growing fruits and vegetables and the very small space that they have to grow them. So when I saw it was in Rotterdam, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The Dutch, they're very crafty.
Yeah, the challenge they are, and they've certainly been the dominating players in this whole controlled environment farming gig.
Yeah.
I think what's the challenge for them, and it is a really big one, is what's happened with the energy crisis.
Oh yeah.
In Northern Europe, and the impact of the war.
Things we don't think about over here.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like it's really impacted them hard. So they are actually now looking at setting up farms in other countries. And that's part of the agenda for the Congress. Because they're now having trouble actually producing profitably using the high-tech glass houses because the energy costs
all the energy
are so high.
Yeah.
The heating, the lighting.
Everything is connected. Everything is connected. And when people say that a war in Ukraine doesn't affect anything, it does. It affects everything. The food chain, the food supply, people, shifts in populations. It's so amazing how interconnected everything is and how blasé we can be about it sometimes. And we have to change that.
We do.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to keeping up with you on social media and seeing what's happening at this Tomato Congress. I would love to see some of the topics, and I am so grateful for the time. I know you're busy, you're jet setting all over the place, and if you ever come to Dallas, Texas, a tomato cocktail is on me.
Sure. Sounds great. I hope there's some vodka
Darryn.
with that.
Of course, naturally. There will always be vodka with something. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tiny Little Victories with Darryn Keiller, CEO of Way Beyond. If you like this episode and all the good work that Darryn's doing with growers and farmers, helping to help them run their business better, grow crops better, it would be great if you would just share this episode with a friend, pass it on to somebody else, maybe post it on your social channel. We would love it. As always, you can listen to every single episode of Tiny Little Victories on our website, www.tinylittlevictoriespodcast.com, or wherever you get your podcasts on. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're all over the place. So if you love this podcast, please share it. I think it's important that everybody is aware of what's going on in the world with how our food is grown because we're all still eating. Okay? So I will see you next week on Tiny Little Victories.